That's all I wanted to know. I didn't want to know anything else, the condition of the road. I was quite happy to drive what I saw. The 4.9 would turn into sort of a series of small instructions. Once again, it would just be, once we got to the middle of the instruction, the navigator would, they were trip masters and twin masters in those days, just pull the button, it should go back to 0 to give you the next reading on the intermediate. And then didn't matter whether it was 50 kilometres away or 1.2 away. It was the same system. It would be, I'd get a count from 400 metres away to what the instruction was, and it would be then reported as 0.4 turn left, 0.3 turn left, 0.2 turn left at T. And with the navigator that I had for many years, his sleeping was very well known. Quite often we'd get to 0.2 and I was aware everything had stopped. There was no more sound. And then I'd say, which way, which way? And he could instantly wake up and say, 0.1, there it is, left. Every time, in 30 years I think we were together, he never missed. But he could sleep well and truly. Wayne Bell, who was the co-driver with me in the 79, he was also a good sleeper. He helped in the preparation of George Shepherd's workshop. And one winter's day, he'd been missing for quite a while. They found him in the gentleman's toilet, leaning against the wall, sound asleep, with his hand in the sink, which was full of warm water, because he felt the cold badly. We saw it again at Buralola, a long, long section, 2 a.m. in the morning, and we pulled in and rolled ourselves out of the car. That was myself and my navigator, Dave Boddy, and they went around and they opened up the left-hand rear door, because that's where we had the third, the relief seat. And he didn't quite wake up, he was just very bleary-eyed. As soon as the mechanics walked away, he went back to sleep. And then as they left the door open, he gradually fell out of the car and was asleep on the ground. But that might start to give you a bit of an inkling as to sort of the pressure that was on people, not just us, on everyone. It was just go, go, go. There was dust, there was all sorts of dramas. I think what this is doing is reminding a lot of the people who were in the event of what it was and how good it was. I'm not being negative in any shape or form. And it is something that I don't think will ever be repeated. In the London to Sydney's, we had a very competitive event, but not to the degree of the Repco. Even the transport stages ended up being competitive. Stuart McLeod, the director, was a great driver and a great navigator and a great organiser. And he set out to make sure that no one felt that it was a pussy event at all, in any shape or form, and boy did he succeed. A couple of things that I might say, and it's all to do with long distance rallying and the joy that I have had, and I hope I don't bore you to death just sort of enjoying myself by telling the stories. But in the London to Sydney, we had a Holden Monaro, 327 turbo hydromatic transmission, 150 gallon petrol tank, etc., etc. The best section of the whole event was we left Crystal Palace and we drove 7,000 kilometres non-stop to Bombay. SS Tucson for 6 days across to Fremantle, then away we went again, 3 days non-stop, Fremantle to Sydney. But going through the mountains, through to Erskine, it suited the Monaro. It was a big car, it was a heavy car, it was 2.25 tonne fully laden. It loved to be able to stretch its legs and it loved to have space. It wanted to get the tail out and it needed good smooth roads for the suspension to work properly for it as a heavy old car. And we were, I think it was 160 or 180 kilometres long. We were conscious of these lights gradually, oh so gradually pulling us in from behind. And when we were about 40k out of Erskine, these lights came right up on the back bumper bar, and just as they nearly got there, I had to brake very hard for this right angle left-hander. This Mark II Lotus Cortina went past. When he was past our front right guard by about, say 10, 12 feet, the whole Lotus Cortina Mark II was going sideways. While he's going sideways, he is gradually moving in front of our car, and I could see the imprint of our driving lights in the side of his car till he got to the corner, and then he accelerated and he was gone. Roger Clark, a name that some of you might know, one of the best exponents of WRC rallying in the early days. That is a memory sort of burnt in my mind, and I shall never forget it. I was just so impressed. This was we thought we were sort of okay as colonials, but when you start to see these overseas people, be it yesterday or today, they are absolutely magnificent. Later on in that particular event, and the outback friendship and assistance that people give to competitors is just legendary. I was working for the Arnott's Biscuits Company in Newcastle at the time, and I befriended a family, the Thompson family, and they had an automotive business. They specialised in Holdens, and they also had contracts with BHP, with the Air Force out at Williamtown, and there were three brothers. I won't go into all the details, but we used to go down and have a drink at the Cross Keys, which was just down from where the service station was. They had a special nibbly night, they called it, to sort of farewell me. And we had a few sherbets, and that was very enjoyable. And Ron, the younger brother, said, "Do you know where you're going yet?" And I said, "Vaguely, but we'll get instructions all the way." He said, "When you hit Australia and you need us, we'll be there." Now, that's a bold statement to make. It's a big country. So, we are coming across into Curnamona Homestead, which is a massive spread near the borders of, I think, 3 states. And we came, I guess, to about, now thinking back, 60 to 70 kilometres out. And I was sitting in the back at the time, and Doug Shivers was driving. And I was conscious of, every now and again, I could see the outline of something black moving. The shrink ring on the left-hand rear axle had let go, says the wheel was moving backwards and forwards. On a right-hander, it was pushed back in. On a left-hander, it would move out. So I said to Doug, we better slow down carefully. We've got a problem. And Doug, who was a very good engineer, he identified very quickly what it was. So he put the car very carefully back into gear and drove off. And he said, we'll go hard on rights and slow on lefts. So we lost a bit of time, but we got there. In getting there, we came down to this little bridge, turned left, and then we had to go up onto a knoll, and here's the control at the top. Sitting at the top is a Holden Ute C.W. Thompson, Newcastle, for Holden service. Ron had gone to the Holden dealer in Broken Hill to find out where the event was going. And at that time, the mechanics were scrambling to get the whole diff assembly out of a statesman on the floor to put in the back of our car. Instead of fiddling around, just put the whole thing in. And Ron had organised for some burly bushmen to lift the back of the car, the whole 2 tonnes of it, onto these 44-gallon drums. 25 to 30 minutes later, we are away. But there's a bit more to the story. When we got to Curnamona, there were Ford flags and Ford people everywhere, light aircraft with the Ford signs on them, not a Holden person in sight, except the local sergeant was driving a Holden. So my navigator went across, that was Dave Johnson, and he said to the sergeant, rah, and this problem and that. Oh God, no, we can't have that. Yeah, Ford, no, I'm a Holden man. So we went to see the lady who was the wife of the chap who managed this big property, and she said, "Oh, right, we'll have to fix this, won't we?" So she rushed in with the sergeant, started pedaling madly on the pedal radio, and they sort of hipped and hopped and so forth right up to the cop shop in Broken Hill, and then the sergeant got on the air. Oh no, he'd given the message, that's right. So the message went to Agnes up the road, then to Stella, then to someone else. And the sergeant had said, whoever is on duty has to stop what they're doing and get down to the Holden dealership and tell them, and he left a message. So that's how that particular one happened. What sort of cooperation is that? It's just amazing. And the stories are out there, and I'm sure there are a lot of people here who can say similar things. And as I was indicated to be no more than 3 or 4 minutes, there's one other thing I'd like to say. I think I mentioned, and I think you all, or nearly all, would have heard when I said at Melbourne that Reg Shepherd Sr. was the man responsible for the start of long-distance rallying in Australia. He came here in '52 from England with the Red X contract, and he was going to set up Red X in Australia. But he wanted publicity. Went to the Australian Sporting Car Club. They started to pull the whole thing together, and it happened. 53, 54, 55. That's where it all started. And the car clubs of that era then were just flooded with people who wanted to go trialling, as it was, not rallying, trialling. Probably it was more map reading than it was competing. You'd sort of leave a control, then you sit down to work out the instructions. They might have said, cross South Creek 14 times from the west and don't go past Ebenezer. All dreadful stuff like that, which drivers do not like. After winning the Goulburn 600 3 years in succession, they said to me I wasn't allowed to enter another event until I set one. So I thought, oh, that's so, how nice. I was running for VW, and the director who was responsible for motorsport was a fanatic for VW Beetles. You've got to take all these things in context. It's relative to the era. It sounds like chicken feed today, but we were running a car with 36 horsepower against, well, look at the Holdens of the era. 2 litre in that 6-cylinder engine when they first started as 48 215s. It's all relative. And after the war, which was, the Reddix was about 8 years later, people were still recovering from that disaster, and the industry hadn't sort of got up and running, and there were no off-the-shelf accessories of any consequence. So Bruce Fraser, who was the director, I was a country rep, and he said, next time you're in Sydney, I'd like you to pop in and I'll show you something. So the next time I was in Sydney, I popped in and he took me down to the workshop and he showed me some packing cases. I thought, oh, that's nice. And then he got one of the boys to open it, and it had a 1600 VW industrial engine, which looks the same as a Beetle engine. If you've seen a Beetle engine, it's got that tinware all around it, and it's cooled vertically. And he said, if we change the magneto and change the exhaust, we will have a 1600C Beetle before the factory, which we did. So then when it was my turn to set this event, because I was banned from running till I did one, I set the map out and I traced the course. We then went out and we surveyed the course, and then we came back and we put it all on paper, using no creek crossings 16 times from the northwest, nothing like that, no map references, just what we see today. And Todd's got a similar thing, which is you've got the intermediates. I had cumulatives as well, simple instruction and a tulip arrow. And then we took the 1600C Beetle out and we actually did the sections, we did the times, we didn't set them on the kitchen table. And it was one of the fastest, and it showed people that there was another way of doing trials, and that the enjoyment factor was enormous because you weren't stopping all the time to plot out map references. And then we just progressively sort of moved through in developing those Beetles, ending up to the point of we had something before the factory did. Now Tim Donovan knows because he was ex-VW. We had a VW with a 12-volt system with disc brakes on the front, with 105 horsepower, 100 to 105 horsepower, limited slip diff. They made, was it four Tim?
And it started off as 4, and we did 5, one for Lynn Gigney later on in
Tasmania. Right.
Yeah.
And that was a magnificent car. We went on to beat the works team from BMC when they came out. Hopkirk, Mackinnon and Altonen, humble VW. But of course Australian roads are sort of, relative to the era, quite different. But that's all about, and that's why we've got an event this period to reflect back on history, certainly the 40-year history back to the Repco. But it all had its birth in things like I have just very quickly across your or through your ears, and it may reside there. So if anyone's got any questions, that might be a good way of ending up about rallying and maybe some preparation. Whatever you've got, just fire a question. If there's nothing, that's beautiful. I'll go back to having my free glass of wine. Why not, Todd?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Has anyone got any questions? Good, well, Harry Firth, how did you meet him? What's the story?
Yes, when I was setting that Goulburn 600, after the event, it was so popular that the word got around, and even the Victorians thought, oh, because they were heavy into navigation. And the Leadfoots all thought, oh, this would be nice, like it was forest racing. So gradually the Victorians came up, including Harry Firth. Time moved on and I became sort of a fairly reasonable friend of his. And we got to the point of having, what have we got? What's going on here? We got to the... Good. Ford, yes, Harry Ford. He was a good Ford man, well and truly. But because we were running these Beetles, we beat him many times, and he couldn't believe it.
You're right.
And I've got one photograph at home. Our two cars are side by side, and his has lights hanging off it everywhere. It had little detectors for black ice. It had negative camber, knobbly tyres, and it was basically a Lotus engine. It was a goer. And because at that stage, when I first went up against him, we had the old VW 6-volt. One driving light, because I couldn't run two, and we were beating him. And that obviously intrigued him. And he had run VWs in one of the Round Australias. So he progressively sort of watched what we were doing. And then when they were going to run Holden's in rallying as a Holden dealer team, not the factory, that came later. Oh, 1979. That was the first official entry of General Motors into trials and rallies. The dealer team name was funnel the money through the dealers, because America said, no money must go to motorsport. Thank heavens John Bagshaw ignored that little instruction. But when they started to go rallying, Harry said, look, we're going to get a Tirana and it'll have a 6-cylinder engine. Do you think you'd like to do a bit of rallying? I thought, oh, that's a nice idea. Yes, that should be a little rocket ship. Well, for 9 months until September of 1970, it was a shocker. If you went round a corner, the same corner, at the same speed, 6 times, it did 6 different things. It didn't know whether it should oversteer, understeer, slide, spin. It was a shocker. So with the might of Holden and their money and the likes of Harry Firth and Ian Tate, they worked and worked and worked and could not get the thing to handle until September of 1970. And we used to wait for the cars to come back from Melbourne, and then we'd get them and we'd go off in an event. So in this MG Newcastle, hadn't driven the car because it came off the trailer. We went to the start. First dirt section, I said to George, they've done it. It handles. And it was absolutely delightful from that point on. And then we went on at the end of that year to win the Southern Cross Rally in the Holden. So that's how I met Harry, and I have a great regard for him. A lot of people misread him, but he was just absolutely focused and intent on getting the maximum out of whatever he was doing. People thought he was arrogant and rude at Bathurst. He would sit on a pile of tyres and look at the ground and wouldn't talk to anyone. He was thinking and planning the various strategies. The record book shows that he was doing the right thing. That's my Harry Firth story. Anything else from anyone?
I've got a couple of questions. First one, how far out were the driving crews put together for the dealer team effort at the start of the 79 Repco? The other one is, how much input did you have in setting the car up just for yourself and the crew that you had?
The first part was, how far out did we know? I think it would have been something like a couple of months. Not a lot of time, but they'd been working on the cars for a long while. And that was one of the keys to the Holdens being good and the Fords being a bit fragile, because Colin Bond didn't get the Ford money until very shortly before the event, and he had no time to do what the Holden boys had been doing. What was the second part? I'm a driver, I don't remember these things.
Yeah, how much input directly did you have into the car?
In the original meetings, we sat down and put all our thoughts together, and then George Shepherd in particular went away and he translated it. But in the final days after we'd taken the mule out and done a bit of running around ourselves, we then contributed cosmetic stuff. Like we wanted in our car to have a twin master and a speed pilot, which has got to this day. Brocky didn't want a speed pilot, and he only wanted a single trip meter, I think they called them then, yes. So it was minimal input, but they had listened in the first instant. And where's Ashley? Where's Ashley? Is he here somewhere?
Over here, yeah.
Ah, right. He came for a ride with me down the track somewhere and read out some stuff that he had from Grant Steers, who was an employee of GM. And I was very, very interested in the pieces that Ashley was reading out, particularly minutes of meetings. And I said I'd love to have seen the minutes of the engineering meetings. They would have been fascinating. He didn't have those. But it confirmed one thing, because there's also, as the years go by, a lot of conjecture about this happened and this didn't, and they had this and they had that. It confirmed that there certainly were only 3 alloy bonnets and 3 alloy boots pressed in the plant at Port Melbourne. Imagine doing that today when you stop the plant and do something special. The weight of a Holden bonnet and a boot, particularly the bonnet, is quite enormous. So that was to help get the weight down. So major things such as that wasn't us saying an alloy bonnet would be nice. That's just someone sort of working out that it would be part of the good recipe to have a good, strong, reliable car and keep that. Key ingredient of rallying and trialling is keep everything as light as possible. And that was question 1. What did I answer 2?
Is there anyone got a question? Otherwise we can take a break. Yeah, no, use that beautiful voice.
You mentioned that the Monaros were 2.25 tonne. Do you remember what weight the Commodores ran at when they were fully loaded on the event?
No, I don't. I can't recall that. It certainly wasn't that much. I think it was in the vicinity of probably getting close to 2 tonne, fully laden. We didn't carry many spares because there was a plan to sort of we replaced the 3 differentials in Broome. In our car, we carried globes, we carried a fan belt. I'm not conscious of anything else that we carried. Oh, a bit of oil, a bit of water. That's it. We kept it as light as we possibly could because George had said these cars will more than go the distance. He said they won't be as fast as the Fords, and they weren't. The Fords would blow the door handles off the Commodores uphill. So we had more weight on board than they certainly did. Now, I think it might have been just shy of 2 tonne, which is not bad when you think of how big a Monaro is. It's only 2.25 tonne. So not much more I can add to that. That's about the weight, I guess.
All right. Is anyone else? Or is we, no? All right. What we're going to do is take a break for 5 minutes, allow you to get a drink, and then we're going to hear from Greg and Mel. Take a toilet break, a drink in 5 minutes. We'll hear from car 202.